Greetings and thanks for coming out. This is my first video where I'm going to try something a little bit different. I'm going to do, this is my super squat. I'm on week 3 now, so there's a couple videos already. This is a superset that I did based on what I listened to in the Huberman podcast about building strength. You can check, the links are in one of the previous videos. But anyways, it's just alternating sets with nice big 4-minute breaks in between. 4 reps, 3 sets each. So it's really about building the strength, the full body strength, where your muscles, your nervous system is all coordinated, so you can just progressively lift more and more weight as you go for whatever set you're on. Squat being the classic, especially when it comes to strength and powerlifting, because of the full body engagement that you get out of it. So that's what I'm working on here. I actually, because I've been having problems with my hips, actually before I get into that, I just want to mention that because these videos, they're just kind of the same thing over and over again, what I'm thinking I'm going to try and do is actually make a little bit of commentary about my previous geology and stock investing experience. Because as people start to become a little bit more interested in gold and the mining sector, I know that it can be a little bit overwhelming and super risky. People know that it's a place where you have to be pretty careful. So I've had some success and some failures with the gold and the tech sector and picking individual stocks. After the squat and the deadlift and talking about the form there, I'm going to jump into that a little bit and just give a bit of a rundown to see what people think, if anybody's interested in hearing more about some of these stories I have. Those were the first 3 sets, and you might have noticed that I'm just ramping up 50 pounds at a time, and if you go back, you'll see that the squat was not very low, and actually I finally feel that I might have kind of unlocked my squat. If you look at my hips are going nice and deep here. And actually, this is the first time I managed to get so deep with still having a straight back. So this is really quite exciting for me that I got that this week. I really feel like I unlocked my hips. And the secret was in where I had, everybody's hips are different, everybody's muscles and knees and everything are different, but my hips, I pointed my toes out way more than what they would suggest in like starting strength, for example. If you look at that book, they tell you that you want maybe 30 degrees, but I'm well over 45 degrees with my toe position in there. And that's what it took. Like if you look at my previous squats, they were barely getting to parallel as I started to get a little bit higher in weight. And if I really tried to push it, then it would result in me like arching my back or pushing my upper body even further forward, which would cause the bar to go forward. Just terrible form, all said. Yeah, you can see here, like I'm just it's going nice and deep. There's just a little bit of my pelvis turning forward at the very bottom of the squat. They call that the butt wink, and that's something you got to be really careful about if you're gonna try and have a long progression or career in squatting heavy. This isn't particularly heavy right now, but you got to get your form right before you start pushing. And I was actually doing 220 pounds before this without really paying attention. This is the first time I've really filmed every set that I did and analyzed my sets. And that's from feedback that I've been getting online, which I've been really appreciative of. Yeah, I'm just kind of backing off, taking it slow, making sure that I got good form and that I'm happy with my form with every set. And if I'm not, then I definitely don't push to the higher weights. I say that, but I get cocky or whatever, wanting to push myself. I shouldn't have jumped, but the bar slides around on my shoulders a lot. Sumo deadlift, I'm doing this because I'm trying to get splits as well. With my martial arts, I want to have really, really flexible hips to be able to kick high and kick wide. So doing the squats, doing the deadlift with very wide stance is really forcing me to have those wide, that flexed out hip and everything. I'm actually with this one. I'm not. It's not that I'm not lifting the weight. It's that I'm trying to flex my hips down as much as I can, and just use the flexing of the hips to lift the bar just that little bit. And that's something that in a recent interview with Ed Cohen, who's like a legendary power lifter, he said that he used to do that. He would just he would get the bar, like when he was going down to a heavy deadlift, he would actually pull his body into such compression that he would get the first 2 or 3 inches of his lift just on that flexing and compression of his body before he actually even started pushing any of his muscles, which is really interesting. So that's what I was trying there. And then I just start getting into the hip, into adding weight. And one of the things that I'm still trying to figure out, it's the same sort of deal of what is the ideal foot position if I'm going to try and have wide stance like this. And then, I also saw another video where the guy was saying that smaller lifters tend to get their highest deadlift weights from a sumo anyway, but then that trend reverses when you start to get into like higher body weight lifters. So I'm not sure what the deal is there. I also have a feeling that somehow my hips are rather high relative to my height, which is like long femurs, and that I think that's one of the reasons why I was having trouble getting my hips down properly with a squat when my feet were pointed too far forward, not pigeon-toed enough. So that's just the stuff I'm playing around with, and soaking up all the Dr. McGill interviews that I can find to try and think about what's happening with my spine. He had a great interview a while ago about how Bruce Lee and that famous 1-inch punch, what kind of spine positioning is done and how that locks your core in place for very good power transmission in a punch. So I've actually linked that little clip from that interview into the description below. It's only a couple minutes. The interview itself is also the same one with Ed Cohen. He's talking about the flexing of the deadlift. Awesome interview if you can handle, and if you like to listen to stuff about anatomy. They're just focusing really on how does a spine handle lifting, injury prevention, what's a good position for your spine, what's a bad position for your spine. And these guys are like real, like proper experts in their field, scientists that are working with all kinds of sports, all kinds of body types. So they definitely don't have hard and fast rules. They look at the specifics of the person, which means that I think you have to be pretty careful if you're going to take specific things that they say. You have to really think about who you are, what's your body like, and what are you trying to do. But fascinating discussion. Like the spine it's the only bones that are set up for compression the way they are, like all the spinal discs, and so it's really, if you're going to be doing a lot of like heavy lifting and stuff, I think that it's part of the game. Is you just got to understand your spine. You got to understand the way it grows through your life, how things change. Fascinating subject, like I said. And this is me practicing for the cat stance, trying to have my core locked in place. So it's not just a shoulder exercise. It's also about having core and hips. Like I shouldn't, like if I could lift this weight properly, I wouldn't be putting my hips forward, but I'm not. And this is me, like 30 pounds is the first, like I just can't do that weight yet. Okay, so vertical fist bench press. This is because with Wing Chun and Okinawan karate, you're punching with a vertical fist from the hip. So with strength, trying to have the whole nervous system. If you're going to be pushing for new strength, you want your nervous system to be training itself as close to the actual movement that you want to be strong in as possible. So that's why I'm using that bar, and it actually, because of the rocking, it makes it kind of forces your wrist, it works your wrist stability, because if you have it up in that position, your wrist is going to wobble quite a bit. And then the last one's the row. I'm not going to talk too much about that. I'll get into what I was talking about with the my past portfolio. So basically, when I got out of university, I got my first job doing gold exploration up in Red Lake, Ontario, and I was working there for maybe 6 months, and I was, as a young professional, had some income, and so it was a good time to go and work on and learn how to be an investor. I was going to be getting stock options in the company, so it's like, okay, it's a good time to learn. I had learned about Warren Buffett, and he seemed to be the guy that I wanted to understand the methods of. I wanted him to be the guru that I learned from. So I bought the Intelligent Investor, and I would get with the fly in, fly out routine. It was 3 weeks on, 3 weeks off. And so I just sat in a cabin in the middle of nowhere during my time off. And for that 3 weeks, I read the Intelligent Investor front to back. And they talked about economics and how do you understand the money supply. And this was around 2010. And so I said, okay, that makes sense. Let me start having a look at the money supply. Of course, this was a book written during the dirty 30s, so it was a very different world back then. But I looked at it, and it was right around the time that quantitative easing was in full force. And I looked at it, and it scared the crap out of me. So I became a gold bull at that time, I guess you could say. And I bought my first stock, but actually I was much more motivated to be a geothermal geologist than a gold geologist. So I went looking for a classic, one of the biggest companies in the group, called Ormat, an Israeli geothermal production company. And it's, I don't remember the ticker, is ORA maybe. And instead of finding Ormat, I found a company called Orbite, which was an alumina, so the raw material that goes into aluminum, stock in Quebec that they were trying to launch, that also had a lot of rare earth elements. And I was just so excited by the story of Orbite that I bought it. And when I bought that, I remember thinking to myself, this is probably a mistake, but screw it, I'm going to learn anyway, and I'm going to give it a try. And I hit the button and I bought, and that company went to zero over however many years. I actually bought it twice, right at the top. So that's obviously a 100% loss. You don't want that kind of stuff happening in your portfolio very often, but it is high risk, high reward sort of plays, so it's kind of comes with the territory. I've had one other stock that went all the way to zero, and then I've also now, as of the pandemic, as part of the GameStop bump, I had one stock that I was able to claim my first 10-bagger. It ended up being 15x by the time I sold it. And also, I can say the same about one of my crypto purchases recently. So I've had some successes and some failures, and I think I'm just going to try and talk about some of those and kind of go back over my decisions at the time, because it's just a little bit boring to watch the same 6 exercises over and over all the time. So if you're interested in checking it out, then feel free to come along. Cheers.